I've been driving trucks for a long time, and over the years I've seen things on the road that most people wouldn't believe. Long nights, empty highways, strange characters at rest stops. You start to realize the world looks very different at 2 in the morning when you're parked somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. I always thought I'd gotten used to it, that nothing could shake me anymore. But there's one night I still think about, one I'll never forget, because of how close I came to being tangled up in something I wanted no part of. Started out like any other long-haul run. I'd been pushing through a long stretch of highway, trying to make up time after getting stuck in traffic earlier in the day. By the time I pulled into a truck stop, it was after midnight. The lot was half full, a mix of semis, a few RVs, and the usual beat-up cars that tend to hang around these places. The overhead lights gave the asphalt a dull yellow glow, leaving big pockets of shadow between the trucks. I was tired, bone tired. I remember cutting the engine and just sitting there for a minute, letting the silence settle after hours of road noise. My eyes felt heavy, my shoulders stiff. I climbed out, stretched my legs, and walked inside to grab a coffee. The place was quiet, just a couple of other drivers sitting at a booth, eating, and a cashier who barely looked up when I came in. I didn't stay long. I wanted a hot drink and a quick walk to stretch before I crashed in the sleeper. The air outside was cool, a little damp, and I remember the smell of diesel and asphalt mixing in the breeze. I walked around my truck once, checking the tires and lights out of habit, then climbed back in, locked the doors, and laid down. I don't know how long I slept, maybe a couple of hours, but I woke up to movement outside. It wasn't anything loud, just the sound of footsteps on gravel, slow and dragging, like someone moving around the trucks. I stayed still at first, listening. Out here, you always hear people moving at odd hours. Drivers going in and out, guys walking their dogs, even the occasional shady character looking for scrap or cans. But something about this felt off. The steps paused near my truck, then moved again. I pushed myself up and peered through the curtain. At first, I didn't see anything, just the glow of the lot lights bouncing off rows of trailers. Then, over by the edge of the lot, I noticed something. A figure slumped against the front wheel of a rig parked a few spots down from me. The way he was sitting didn't look right. He was twisted, like he'd just collapsed there. I sat there a long minute, watching. No movement, no attempt to get up. The footsteps I'd heard were gone. My gut told me to mind my own business. Truckers learn early not to get too involved in things that don't concern them. But the longer I stared, the clearer it became. Something was wrong. I finally climbed out of the cab and walked over. The closer I got, the worse the feeling in my stomach grew. The man wasn't just asleep or passed out drunk. He was dead. His head was tilted at a sharp angle, his clothes stained dark. His skin looked pale under the buzzing light. I froze, just staring. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't some guy who had keeled over from exhaustion. He had been dumped there. You could see it in the way his body was positioned, like he'd been dragged and propped up against the tire. I backed away fast, my hands sweating, my heart pounding in my chest. The first thought in my head was, someone did this and they might still be around. I scanned the shadows between the trucks, half expecting to see someone watching me. But the lot looked empty, quiet. I went back to my rig and locked the doors. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called it in. When the police arrived, the place lit up with flashing red and blue. They blocked off the lot, questioned the drivers, and started marking off the area with tape. I gave my statement, told them I'd woken up, heard something, and then found the body. They didn't seem surprised. That's what struck me. They acted like they already had an idea of what had happened before they even got there. One of the officers jotted notes while another looked over at me like they were sizing me up, deciding how much to say. I stuck to the basics. I heard something, looked out, saw him, and called. That was it. Later, after more police cars and a coroner's van showed up, I overheard bits and pieces. They thought the guy had been killed somewhere else and then dumped in the parking lot right next to the rigs, like someone just needed a place to leave him, and this truck stop was as good as any. That thought chilled me more than anything. The idea that while I was asleep just a few feet away, someone had pulled in, rolled a body out, and left it there like trash. I kept replaying the footsteps in my head, realizing I must have heard the killer walking away. If I had looked out sooner, maybe I would have seen them. Maybe they would have seen me. The rest of the night dragged on forever. I couldn't leave until the police finished their work, and I sat in my cab watching them move around with flashlights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale face slumped against the tire. By morning, the lot was almost back to normal. A few rigs pulled out, new ones came in, the diner opened for breakfast. But nothing felt normal. I kept thinking about how close I'd been to the whole thing. If I'd stepped out at the wrong moment, I might have been the one lying there, dumped and forgotten. When the police finally let me go, I drove out of that lot without looking back. The highway stretched out in front of me like it always did, but I couldn't shake the thought that somewhere out there, whoever had done it was still driving too. Maybe in another truck, maybe in a car, maybe watching me as I pulled away. I've passed through hundreds of truck stops since that night, but I never park without remembering it. I always double-check my locks, always keep my curtains drawn tight, and every time I hear footsteps outside, I wonder if it's just another driver, or if someone's walking away from something they left behind. What still unsettles me most is how casual it seemed for the police, like they'd seen it before. Maybe they had. Maybe things like that happen more than the rest of us realize. Out on the road, there are long stretches of darkness where anything can happen. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Sometimes the scariest part of being out here isn't the loneliness or the long hours. It's realizing how close you can come to something terrible without even knowing it, and how easy it is for someone else to vanish into the night, leaving behind nothing but questions and a body propped up in the shadows of a truck stop. I've been driving trucks for years, and there's a certain rhythm to life on the road. You get used to the long stretches of blacktop, the endless hum of the engine, and the feel of the wheel vibrating in your hands. You get used to the loneliness too, the way whole days pass without seeing another person except at a fuel stop or a dock. It's part of the job, and most of the time I don't think about it too much. But sometimes, the silence of the road turns on you. Sometimes it makes you notice things you'd rather not. This was one of those times. I was running late one night through a stretch of two-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. I can't even remember which state it was anymore. Somewhere flat, mostly farmland, the kind of country where you could drive for miles and only see the faint light of a farmhouse way off in the distance. No towns, no gas stations, just road and darkness. The load was standard, lumber on a flatbed, and it wasn't giving me any trouble. The weather was clear, cool, nothing unusual. But there was something about that night that felt heavier than normal, like the dark pressed closer to the road than it usually did. The headlights lit up only the lines ahead and the edge of the shoulder, and everything else stayed swallowed in shadow. After a while, I noticed a car in my mirror. Nothing strange at first, cars end up behind you all the time. But this one just hung back there. Not close enough to pass, not far enough to ignore. Just a steady pair of headlights, locked on me. I kept checking my mirrors, expecting it to either speed up or drop back. But it didn't. Mile after mile, it just followed. The longer it stayed there, the more I started to think about it. Out here, you don't see much traffic at night. Usually, cars that get stuck behind me don't stay long. They either push past me or turn off. But this one didn't. At some point, I realized I had been glancing at my mirrors more than I had been watching the road ahead. That's never a good sign. My shoulders were tight, and my palms were sweating against the wheel. I told myself it was nothing, just a driver zoning out, matching my pace by accident. But it didn't feel like an accident. After maybe 20 minutes of this, I spotted a wide pull-off. Not a truck stop, not a rest area, just one of those long gravel shoulders where you can park if you have to check your load. I put on my signal and eased over, slowing to a stop. The car kept going, rolling past me at a steady speed without even a glance. Its taillights disappeared into the night ahead. I sat there for a few minutes, letting my heart slow down. I climbed down, walked around the truck, pretended to check my straps. Everything was fine. I got back in, pulled onto the road again, and settled back into my seat. For a while, nothing happened. The road stretched out quiet and empty again, and I almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Then I saw it. The same pair of headlights, up ahead on the side of the road. The car was parked on the shoulder, lights on but no hazard flashers. As I rolled closer, I kept my eyes locked on it. Nobody inside, or at least nobody I could see. I drove past, my pulse jumping, and checked my mirrors. The car stayed put for a moment, then pulled back onto the road. It caught up faster this time, and soon it was behind me again. Same distance, same steady pace. My chest tightened, and my throat felt dry. I gripped the wheel harder and tried to ignore it. I told myself I just needed to get to the next town, find a truck stop, somewhere with people around. But the miles ticked by, and no towns appeared. No exits, no gas stations, nothing but the same two-lane road threading through the black fields. And that car stayed with me. Eventually, I tried something different. I slowed down. Not just a little, I dropped 10-15 miles per hour. If they were really just zoning out, they'd either notice and pass or back off. But the car slowed with me, keeping the same gap. The tension in my gut turned to cold dread. This wasn't an accident. Whoever was in that car was matching me deliberately. My hands itched to grab the radio, but I was too far from anyone to pick up chatter. Cell service was spotty out there too, and I didn't trust it. I just kept driving, eyes darting between the road ahead and the mirrors. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw a sign for a truck stop, 10 miles ahead. That was all I needed, 10 more miles. I pushed the truck harder, ignoring the way my pulse hammered in my ears. The car stayed with me. The closer I got to the exit, the more my nerves buzzed. I knew I didn't want to pull into a dark, empty lot with that car right behind me. I needed people around. I needed light. When I finally hit the ramp, I didn't slow down much. I took the turn harder than I should have and rumbled into the truck stop, my eyes darting everywhere for signs of life. There were 3 rigs parked in the back, lights glowing from inside their cabs. The store itself was lit up, neon buzzing above the door. I pulled straight up front, right under the floodlights, engine still running. The car followed me into the lot, rolling slow, then cruised past without stopping. It circled once, headlights sweeping over the parked trucks, then turned back toward the highway and disappeared. I sat there for a long time, hands still clenched on the wheel, staring at the empty road beyond the exit. My whole body was tight, every nerve screaming. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd stopped anywhere darker, quieter, I might not have had the chance to sit there at all. I went inside eventually, bought a coffee, and pretended to browse the aisles while I calmed down. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see those headlights again. But they never came back. I don't know what that driver wanted. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just someone messing with me, trying to scare me for kicks. Or maybe it was something worse. Out there on those empty back roads, you don't take chances. You don't let your guard down. That night taught me a lesson I haven't forgotten. The road itself doesn't scare me. The dark, the long miles, the isolation, I can handle all that. What scares me are the people who use that isolation to their advantage. People who don't mean well. People who know that if something happens to you in the middle of nowhere, nobody will be around to see it. I never saw that car again, but every time I'm out on a dark 2-lane with nothing but fields around me, I catch myself checking the mirrors a little more than usual, waiting to see if those headlights are back there. Because the scariest part of trucking isn't breaking down or getting caught in a storm. It's realizing that sometimes the only thing standing between you and trouble is how fast you can think when the wrong set of headlights decides to follow you. I've been driving trucks for a long time, and I've had plenty of nights where I've pulled into a lot half asleep, just looking for a place to rest. But there's one night I'll never forget, because of how close I came to being tangled up in something I had no business being near. Looking back, I can honestly say one thing. It's good I didn't get arrested, because for a while there, it felt like I was standing right on the edge of trouble without even knowing it. It was late, well past midnight, when I decided to stop. I'd been on the road since early morning, hauling a load across state lines. The highway had been long and empty for hours, just the drone of the tires and the dark ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead. I was exhausted, my back ached, my eyelids kept getting heavy, and I knew better than to keep pushing when I was that tired. A truck stop appeared off an exit, one of those small, older ones, and I figured it would do. The lot wasn't well lit. A few yellow lamps buzzed above cracked pavement, throwing patches of light and leaving plenty of shadows in between. A few semis were lined up along the far end, and a couple of cars were scattered near the diner. The air smelled like diesel and damp asphalt, with that faint sour edge you always get at places that haven't been cleaned in a while. I parked near the edge, killed the engine, and got out to stretch. My legs were stiff and my shoulders were tight from the long drive. I walked into the diner, grabbed a coffee, and then went back to the rig. I didn't feel like dealing with people. I just wanted to get a couple hours of rest before moving on. I locked my doors, pulled the curtains, and stretched out in the sleeper. At some point, I drifted off. The kind of sleep where you're not really gone, just hovering in and out. I woke up to the sound of something outside. At first, I thought it was another driver moving around. Doors shutting, boots on gravel. That kind of noise is normal at truck stops. But after a while, I noticed flashing lights spilling across the curtains. Red and blue, cutting through the dark. I sat up, heart pounding a little, and pulled the curtain back. A police cruiser was parked near the middle of the lot, headlights on, lights still flashing. A few officers were walking around with flashlights, shining them between the trucks, checking the shadows. The longer I watched, the more uneasy I felt. More cruisers pulled in. Soon the whole lot was glowing red and blue, the light bouncing off the sides of the trailers. I couldn't see what had happened, but I knew it wasn't something small. Nobody rolls in that many cars for nothing. I stayed quiet in my cab, just watching. After a while, I saw what they were all working around. A car was parked a few spots down from me, a dark sedan I hadn't paid attention to earlier. The police had taped off the area, and I could see them moving back and forth, shining lights inside. Then the coroner's van pulled in. That's when it sank in. Somebody was dead. That realization hit me hard. Here I was, parked only a short distance away, sleeping while someone was killed or dumped right in the same lot. My chest tightened as I thought about it. What if I'd woken up earlier? What if I'd gotten out to use the restroom at the wrong time? I could have walked right into it. Hours dragged by. The police worked slowly, moving around the car, photographing everything, marking off spots on the ground. They walked near my truck a couple times, but they never knocked, never asked me anything. I was glad for that. The last thing I wanted was to be dragged into something I knew nothing about. By the time the sun came up, the whole place still looked like a scene out of a crime show. Most of the other drivers stayed put, same as me. Nobody wanted to get mixed up in it. Eventually, though, an officer came around, asking if anyone had seen or heard anything. When he reached my rig, I told him the truth, that I'd gone to sleep after pulling in, and the only thing I noticed was the flashing lights later on. That was it. He wrote something down, nodded, and moved on. No accusations, no long questions. That was it for me, and that was good, because the way they were treating the area, I knew whoever they were looking for, they were taking it seriously. If I'd said the wrong thing, or if they thought I'd seen more than I did, it could have tied me up in something I had no part of. After they cleared the scene and the cruisers finally pulled out, I sat in the cab for a while, just thinking. My coffee was cold, my nerves still raw. I looked around the lot, realizing how empty it felt now. Just a few rigs idling, a couple of drivers walking back from the diner. Nothing left to show for what had happened except some tape fluttering on the pavement. I started my truck and pulled out, the tires crunching on gravel as I rolled toward the highway. But the whole drive that day, I couldn't shake the thought. Someone had died right there, maybe killed somewhere else and dumped, maybe killed in that lot. And I had been close enough to hear the footsteps, close enough to see the flashing lights fill my cab. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you. I thought about how easily it could have gone differently. What if the police had decided I needed to be questioned longer? What if my rig had been parked closer to that car, and they thought I'd seen something? What if I'd gotten out at the wrong time and the person who left that body saw me? That's what haunted me the most. Not the body itself, but the thin line between being just another driver in the lot and being caught up in the middle of something I'd never escape. I was lucky. I wasn't arrested, wasn't dragged into it. I gave my short statement and drove away. That was good because out here, an arrest, even just suspicion, can ruin everything. A driver's record is his life. One bad mark, one accusation, and you can lose your livelihood. I think about that night often. Every time I pull into a quiet lot, I check the shadows more now. I notice the cars parked too far from the lights, the people walking between the rigs at odd hours. I double-check my locks, pull the curtains tight, and keep my ears open, because that night taught me something important. Sometimes you're closer to danger than you realize. Sometimes it's just a few feet away in the dark, and the only thing that separates you from it is chance. And when the police roll in, when the red and blue lights bounce across the pavement, you realize just how lucky you are that you didn't step out at the wrong time, that you weren't the one standing too close, that you didn't get pulled into something you'll never get free of. That night, I wasn't arrested. I wasn't even really involved. But I was close enough to see the edge of it, and that was enough. Out here on the road, sometimes being lucky is the only thing that keeps you moving forward. And for me, that night, lucky meant staying quiet, staying inside, and driving away when the sun came up. I used to drive trucks for a living, mostly long hauls up and down the UK. The stretch between Edinburgh and London became second nature to me after a while. Long hours of road humming beneath me, the cab smelling faintly of diesel and old coffee, and the monotony of motorway lights at night blending together like a slow-moving ribbon. I saw a lot of strange things on those drives, things most people would dismiss as imagination or just tricks of exhaustion. But one night still stands out more than the rest, and I've told it enough times that I know every detail like it happened yesterday. Started off as an ordinary haul. I was carrying a full trailer down to London, set to arrive before dawn if everything went smoothly. The roads were steady, the weather decent for once, and traffic was light enough that I felt like I was gliding through the dark. Around the halfway point, somewhere past Newcastle, I noticed a car sliding up along my right side. It wasn't unusual. Cars often ride up next to lorries while they're overtaking, but something about it caught my attention. I looked over, and that's when I saw her. A woman in the passenger seat, hair pulled back into a tight bun, the kind you'd expect from a schoolteacher or someone trying to keep every strand in place. My brain immediately thought of Miss Trunchbull from Matilda, the same severe knot, the same tightness. But what really froze me wasn't her hair. It was her face. She was staring straight at me, not blinking, her mouth pulled tight and her eyes wide with something I can only describe as fear. It wasn't anger, it wasn't curiosity. It was the kind of look someone gives when they're trapped or in danger. I didn't know how to react. My first thought was maybe she needed help. Maybe she was trying to signal me. Maybe her driver was dangerous. Maybe it was some domestic situation playing out on the motorway. Before I had the chance to properly process it, the car swerved toward the exit and disappeared. I was left gripping the wheel tighter than before, watching the empty space where her eyes had been. I tried to shake it off. You see plenty of odd things on the road. People pulling faces, kids waving, even the occasional person playing games with truckers just to get a reaction. I told myself it was nothing, just some strange coincidence, but the image stayed in my head, her wide eyes boring into me, her mouth drawn so tight it looked painful. Half an hour later, still heading south, another car pulled alongside. Different make, different color, different driver. I wouldn't have thought anything of it until I saw the passenger. My stomach turned cold. It was the same woman, same bun, same terrified stare, like her face had been frozen in time and copied into this new car. She looked at me the same way she had before, eyes huge, mouth taut, completely still except for the frantic energy in her expression. I muttered to myself that this couldn't be real. There was no way it was coincidence anymore. My chest tightened and I knew I had to do something. I decided I'd pull into the next services and tell someone. Even if I couldn't explain it properly, even if it sounded like madness, I figured the police might want to know if some woman was being driven up and down the motorway looking terrified. But before I reached the services, the car sped up, merging away into the darkness ahead. I didn't even catch a plate. I stared at the road in front of me, furious with myself for not noting down anything useful. What could I report? There's a woman with a bun who looks scared. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the dread curling in my gut. For hours, nothing happened. Just the steady drone of the motorway, the occasional headlights flashing past, the sound of my own breathing inside the cab. I kept glancing at every car that came near me, heart rate kicking up each time, but none of them carried that same figure. I started to think maybe it was done. Maybe whatever bizarre sequence had been happening was over. But almost 4 hours later, nearly at London, it happened again. Another car eased up alongside me, different from the others, but there she was. Same severe bun, same expression, but this time it was worse. She wasn't just staring. She was screaming, her mouth wide open, eyes practically bulging, face pressed toward the glass as if she wanted me to hear her through the sealed window. She wasn't moving, wasn't pointing, wasn't gesturing, just screaming directly at me, like I was the one who needed to understand. That was the moment I broke. My hands were slick on the wheel, my throat tight. I didn't think. I just pulled off into the next lobby and grabbed my phone. My hands shook as I dialed. I told the police what I had seen, fumbling through it, trying to explain that I'd seen the same woman 3 times in 3 different cars, that she looked like she was in trouble. The operator told me they'd already received several other calls about the same woman in the same area within the past few minutes. That chilled me more than anything else. I wasn't the only one seeing her. Other drivers had spotted her too, in different cars, with that same unmistakable hair and the same look of fear. I waited in that lobby for a while, half expecting another car to crawl past with her in it, but nothing came. When I finally got back on the road, the stretch felt heavier, like the air itself had thickened. My eyes darted to every vehicle I passed, expecting to see her again, but she was gone. By the time I reached London, dawn was creeping up. I checked the news obsessively in the days after, looking for any sign of a report, any story about a missing woman, an abduction, a motorway incident, something that would explain it. But there was nothing. No updates, no police statement, nothing in the papers. It was as if it never happened. The memory still unsettles me. I try to reason it out, to think of rational explanations. Maybe it was some elaborate prank. Maybe it was some bizarre coincidence of similar-looking women, though the odds of that are absurd. Maybe the reports went nowhere. Maybe the police knew more than they said but never released it. What I do know is that I saw her. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times in 3 separate cars hours apart. And each time her face told the same story. Pure, unfiltered terror. I never saw her again after that night, but I've never been able to forget the feeling that whatever was happening to her was real, and I was just one of the unlucky ones who caught a glimpse. I still wonder what the truth was, and whether she ever made it out of whatever nightmare she was living. Or maybe she didn't, and that's why her story never reached the news. Either way, every time I drove that same stretch of motorway after, I kept my eyes forward and tried not to look too long at the cars passing beside me. Because once you've seen a face like that, it never leaves you. I've been driving trucks long enough to know that the road plays tricks on you if you let it. The stretches blur together, the hum of the tires becomes a kind of hypnotic lull, and sometimes you lose track of the hours. They call them soft places. Those long, empty stretches where nothing changes. No signs, no towns, no breaks in the trees, and your mind starts slipping. I didn't believe in the idea until it happened to me, and even now I can't explain it in a way that makes sense. All I know is that time gets fuzzy out there, and what I went through still makes me question my own memory. It started on a run from Manchester to Dover. I'd driven the route plenty of times, but that night the roads were unusually quiet. I had left late in the evening and expected to reach Dover just before sunrise. The weather was clear, no fog, no rain, just a steady cool night that should have made for smooth driving. I stocked up on strong coffee and thought it would be an easy trip. About 2 hours in, somewhere south of Birmingham, I hit one of those long stretches. The kind of motorway where the road just keeps going straight, fields stretching out on either side, occasional hedgerows flashing past in the dark, but otherwise nothing changes. The traffic had thinned until I was practically alone. My headlights lit up the road and the reflective posts at the side, and the sound of the engine filled the cab. I glanced at the dashboard clock and it read just past midnight. I kept driving, sipping coffee, fiddling with the vents to keep myself awake. At one point, I thought I saw a sign for the next services, but when I passed it, it just said 20 miles. That was fine. I figured I'd stop there, stretch my legs, and top up my thermos. The strange part came when I checked the clock again. It still read just past midnight. Not 10 minutes later, not even a single minute later, the same exact time I'd seen before. I frowned, tapped the glass with my knuckle, thinking maybe the clock had stuck. But when I looked again a while later, it had jumped forward almost an hour. I told myself I must have zoned out. It happens when you've been driving for too long. You lose track, miss little details, even skip whole chunks without realizing it. Still, something about it felt off. I didn't remember passing any exits or signs in that missing time. Just road and more road. When the services finally came up, I pulled in. The place was nearly empty. Couple of cars, no other trucks. I parked and went inside, but even that felt strange. The cafe was closed, though the lights were still on. Chairs stacked on tables like it had been shut down for the night. The shop was open but quiet. No music playing, no staff around until a man finally came out from the back. I bought a bottle of water just to have an excuse to leave quickly, then went back to the cab. Something about the emptiness unsettled me. Back on the road, I tried to shake it off, but the longer I drove, the stranger it felt. Time wasn't lining up. I'd glance at the clock, swear only minutes had passed, then glance again and see that nearly an hour was gone. Other times it was the opposite. I'd feel like I'd been driving forever only to see the clock crawl forward by a single minute. The road itself didn't help. The scenery didn't change. Mile after mile of hedgerows, dark fields, and the occasional overhead bridge. I knew these roads well enough to know there should have been villages, service stations, more exits than I was seeing. Instead, it was as if the world had narrowed down to nothing but the stretch in front of me. At one point, I tried to check my phone to compare the time, but the signal was dead. Not weak, dead. No bars, no data, no nothing. That shouldn't have been possible. Even in the most rural areas, I'd get at least a flicker of service. I put the phone down and focused on the lines of the road, my grip tight on the wheel. The oddest part was the traffic, or rather, the lack of it. For nearly 2 hours, I didn't see another vehicle. No headlights behind me, no taillights ahead. Just me, the road, and the strange feeling that I wasn't moving forward at all. When I finally did see a car, it startled me. A dark saloon appeared ahead in the slow lane. I passed it and glanced at the driver, but the windows were tinted and the face inside just a blur. I pushed on, relieved at the company, even if it was only one car. But 10 minutes later, there it was again, the same car, ahead of me in the same lane, as if I'd never overtaken it. My throat went dry. I overtook it again, forced myself not to look this time, and pressed harder on the accelerator. But sure enough, not long after, the same shape of taillights appeared ahead, crawling along like it had been waiting for me. I stopped looking after that, just passed it each time and tried to focus on the road. When the sky finally began to lighten, I nearly cried with relief. The horizon went from black to gray, and then pale blue. But even then, the strangeness didn't stop. I should have been nearing Dover, but the signs still read as though I was hours away. My fuel gauge told the same story. I'd burned far more diesel than should have been possible for the distance covered. By the time I did roll into Dover, the sun was fully up. I felt wrung out, like I'd driven twice the length of the country. I parked up and checked the time. According to the dash clock, I was 2 hours later than expected. According to my phone, I was nearly 5. I still don't know where those extra 3 hours went. I asked around the docks, trying to figure out if there had been roadworks, diversions, anything that could explain the lost time. Nobody knew of any. The roads had been clear all night, they said. Normal traffic, no closures. That was years ago, and I still don't have an answer. Maybe it was fatigue. Maybe my mind slipped somewhere between the stretches of hedgerows and the hum of the tires. Maybe I drove slower than I realized. Maybe I stopped without remembering. Maybe there's a perfectly ordinary explanation. But I can't shake the feeling of those soft places on the road, the ones where time gets fuzzy, where the distance bends, where you're not sure if you're moving forward at all. I've been careful ever since. If I hit one of those stretches, I make sure to stop, take a break, reset myself before the road swallows me up again. Because once you've felt time slip through your fingers like that, you start to wonder how much of your life might vanish in the same way, without you ever noticing until it's already gone. Long-haul trucking does things to your head that most people can't imagine. Hours alone, staring at the same stretch of road, the same signs, the same landmarks repeating themselves until you start doubting what you've already passed. I've driven through the night more times than I can count, but one trip stands out because it felt like I had been swallowed up by the road itself. It wasn't ghosts or anything supernatural, but the experience was terrifying enough to keep me questioning my own memory every time I look at a map. I was hauling freight down through the Midlands, a route I'd done before and knew pretty well. It was late, past midnight, and the motorway was quiet enough that it felt like I had it all to myself. That should have been a good thing, but the emptiness makes every mile stretch longer than it should. I had my thermos of coffee, a couple of snacks within arm's reach, and the dash lit up just enough to remind me of the hours ticking by. About an hour past Birmingham, I noticed something strange. I saw a distinctive roadside sign, one of those odd landmarks you remember without meaning to. It was an old, leaning billboard for a farm shop, half the paint peeled, the words barely legible. I passed it, kept going, and didn't think much of it. But 40 minutes later, I passed the same sign again. Not one like it, the same exact one. Same angle, same broken corner, same dark patch of moss spreading across the bottom. My stomach tightened. I knew for a fact I hadn't turned off anywhere. I'd been locked steady in my lane, not even an exit for miles. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe there were two billboards like it. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe fatigue was making me misremember. I brushed it off and focused harder on the lines of the road. But then it happened again. Another hour later, there it was, the same battered billboard leaning the same way. My knuckles went white on the wheel. There was no way this was coincidence. I pulled out my phone when I reached a stretch with no bends, checked the map, and confirmed I was still on the right motorway. No loops, no turns, just a straight shot forward. And yet, somehow, I had gone in a circle. I started paying closer attention. Every roadside feature, every sign, every small thing I could latch onto, I memorized. A cluster of trees with a crooked branch overhanging the barrier. A rest area sign pointing to services that were still miles away. A little farm building in the distance with its lights on. I burned each of these into my head as I passed them. And sure enough, after another long stretch of driving, I saw them all again in the exact same order. It was like I was trapped in some kind of loop, driving the same miles over and over without any explanation. My brain kept looking for a rational cause. Maybe there was a hidden diversion. Maybe I'd missed a turn without realizing it. Maybe some section of the motorway curved back on itself in a way I hadn't noticed before. But the map didn't lie. According to GPS, I was moving forward. And yet my eyes told me I was right back where I had been before. The scariest part wasn't just the repetition. It was the time. My dash clock showed the hours slipping by as normal, but my progress made no sense. I should have been 3/4 of the way to my destination, but when I checked the mileage, I had barely covered half. My fuel gauge confirmed it. I was burning diesel, chewing through the hours, but covering almost no distance at all. I thought about pulling over, but the laybys I passed looked identical each time, and the idea of stopping in them made my skin crawl. I imagined myself stepping out into silence, standing in the middle of nowhere with the hum of my cooling engine and nothing else. So I kept going. At some point, another truck finally appeared in my mirrors. Relief washed over me like cold water. I wasn't alone anymore. I let it pull alongside and pass, its lights briefly flooding my cab. But 20 minutes later, I saw it again. Same truck, same company logo on the trailer, same dent in the back corner panel. It overtook me a second time like it had never passed before. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one caught in whatever was happening. The fatigue set in harder than usual. My eyes burned, my mouth was dry, and my muscles ached from gripping the wheel. I couldn't tell how long I'd been stuck in that loop, only that the night refused to move on. It was as if dawn itself had stalled, the horizon locked in a constant blackness with no hint of light. Finally, after what felt like endless repetition, I saw something different. A junction I didn't recognize. Without hesitation, I veered off, tires rumbling as I took the exit. The road curved away, narrower, less lit, but it was new, something I hadn't seen before. My heart pounded as I drove down it, praying it would break me out of the cycle. After about 10 miles, the road spat me back onto the motorway, but this time things felt different. More traffic appeared, a few cars and another lorry, like the world had started back up again. The signs ahead were new, pointing me toward London, and the landscape finally began to change. By the time I saw the glow of dawn on the horizon, I was shaking with exhaustion but more relieved than I'd ever been in my life. When I parked at my drop-off point hours later, I pulled the map up again and tried to make sense of it. There was no reasonable explanation for the loop I'd done. No hidden circles, no missing turns, no strange detours. The road was exactly as I'd always known it. Straight, clear, simple. And yet I had passed the same features 3, maybe 4 times in the span of one night, with no explanation for the missing hours or the wasted fuel. I thought about reporting it, but what could I even say? That the motorway folded in on itself and trapped me until I broke free at some random junction? Nobody would believe that. It sounded insane even to me, so I kept quiet, delivered the load, and got some sleep. To this day, when I drive that stretch, I can't stop myself from staring at the landmarks. The crooked tree, the farm sign, the distant light on the ridge. They're all still there, and I pass them once like normal now. But every time, my stomach twists with the memory of when they wouldn't stop coming back. The only way I can explain it to myself is this. Something about that night, that stretch, warped the sense of distance and time. Maybe I was too tired. Maybe I got disoriented. Maybe the road itself plays tricks when it's empty enough. I don't know. But I do know that I burned hours and fuel without moving forward like I should have. And I never want to go through that again. Now, I never drive that road at night if I can avoid it. Because once you've been caught in a loop like that, watching the same signs and the same miles repeat while your clock insists you're still moving forward, you never forget it. It was the most terrifying part of my career, and it taught me one thing above all else. On those long, empty roads, the scariest thing isn't what you see. It's realizing you might not be getting anywhere at all. I've heard plenty of wild theories from truckers at rest stops, and most of them are just stories that grow legs over the years. But there's one thought that stuck with me, something someone once said about driving tired and what it does to the brain. The theory was simple, and it made the hair on my arms stand up the first time I heard it. If you let yourself slip too far into exhaustion, your mind starts playing tricks, and it can feel like the road resets itself, like you're trapped in a loop you can't even explain. Some people laugh it off as nonsense, but I've had one run in my life that makes me think about it more than I'd like to admit. I was hauling refrigerated freight through the canyons in Utah, late summer, years back. I had been awake longer than I should have been, pushing the hours because the load was time-sensitive and the company wanted it delivered on schedule. I wasn't running illegal exactly, but I was bending the limits the way a lot of drivers do, pushing my body further than it wanted to go. I had been on the road since morning, crossed through Nevada, and was winding my way east toward Colorado. By the time I hit those canyons, the sky had gone dark, the air was still, and I was riding the white line with that hollow, buzzing kind of focus you get when you've been staring straight ahead for too many hours. The canyon roads there don't give you much space to relax. The walls press in on both sides, high rock faces that catch your headlights and throw them back in strange shadows. The curves aren't sharp, but they're steady, and you have to keep your eyes moving or you'll drift. I remember telling myself I'd pull over at the next wide turnout, grab a thermos of coffee, maybe even shut my eyes for 20 minutes. But the next turnout came and went, and so did the one after that, and each time I thought, just a little further, I'll stop just a little further down the road. That's when I noticed something that unsettled me. There was a rock formation off to the right side of the road, shaped almost like a crooked tooth sticking out of the desert floor. I'd seen it once before during daylight on a different run, and it was distinctive enough that I recognized it instantly. Passing it at night under the beam of my headlights gave me a weird sense of déjà vu, like the road had folded back on itself. But I brushed it off, told myself it was just a landmark that looked similar to others. Half an hour later, though, there it was again. Same angle, same shape, same crack along the top edge where it met the sky. I felt my chest tighten. The first thought that hit me was that I must have gotten turned around somehow. Maybe I had missed a junction in the dark and looped back by mistake. But that didn't make sense. There hadn't been a single exit, no fork in the road, no way for me to double back without noticing. I kept driving, chewing the inside of my cheek to keep myself awake, and tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Tired brains do strange things, I told myself. You miss time, you mix up places. But then, another 30 minutes or so down the road, I passed the same damn formation again. My stomach turned cold when I saw it, because by then I had been watching the clock on the dash. I wasn't hallucinating the time. It was ticking forward. Fuel was burning, but the landscape wasn't changing. There's a feeling I can't quite describe that came over me at that point, like I was driving inside a tunnel of repetition. My headlights only reached so far, and the road stretched out in front of me like it was endless, recycling itself under my wheels. My body wanted to pull over and sleep, but my mind told me if I did that I might not wake up, or worse, I'd wake up to find I'd drifted into the canyon wall. So I pressed on. The third time I saw that rock formation, I caught myself gripping the wheel too hard, my hands stiff and aching. I kept asking myself if I had made some mistake, if fatigue was so deep in me that I'd blacked out stretches of road and circled back without memory. I tried to check the GPS, but the signal was cutting in and out between the canyon walls, and the map froze on the same section of road. It offered no reassurance. The conspiracy theory someone told me years later, that maybe when you're that far gone, you crash and the world resets you, haunts me because it explains the feeling I had in that moment. Like I was teetering on the edge of something final, and the only way through was to keep my mind sharp, to stay awake, to be aware. Because the second I slipped, that was it. Maybe I'd never pass that rock, never get out of the loop. Maybe that rock was the marker of where my body gave out. By the time I saw it the fourth time, I was drenched in sweat even though the night air was cool. My eyes were burning, and I could feel every beat of my heart in my throat. I forced myself to do things to stay present. Slap my own cheek, roll the window down and gulp the air, shift in my seat constantly. I even pulled over for a moment, stood on the gravel shoulder, stretched my legs, and looked back at the canyon behind me. It all looked the same, quiet, still, no sign of other vehicles. Just me, the truck, and the rocks. When I finally broke free of it, I knew. I passed the tooth-shaped rock one last time, and after that the canyon started to change. The walls opened wider, the curves smoothed out, and I saw the glow of a town's lights on the horizon. My chest eased for the first time in hours, and I realized how close I'd come to collapsing. I pulled into a truck stop on the outskirts, parked, and shut everything down. When I climbed into the bunk, I lay there shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of what had just happened. If I had let myself drift even a little harder into that haze, maybe I would have crashed in that canyon, and maybe the repetition I felt was my brain's last desperate attempt to keep me alive. Maybe that rock was my body's warning sign, a line in the sand between making it out or never leaving at all. The ending is simple, but it's stayed with me ever since. I didn't crash. I didn't get stuck in a loop forever. I made it out, but I'll never forget that stretch of road. And I'll never push myself that far past exhaustion again. Some people talk about conspiracies like the universe giving you a reset, but I think the truth is worse. I think your mind tries to reset itself when it knows your body is about to fail, and if you don't catch it in time, you don't wake up. That night, I learned the real horror of trucking isn't the stories about ghosts or creatures on the highway. It's your own body betraying you, pulling you into a loop you may not escape. And for me, the reminder will always be a tooth-shaped rock in the canyon, passed too many times to be a coincidence, but just enough to make me fight for one more mile until I was free.